Welcome to the Executive Hustle podcast, where I am your host, Kirsten Urich, speaker, author, retired CEO, mother of four, and recovering workaholic. Explore with Central Pennsylvania local executives what it takes to lead well, live well, and learn well. Understanding that leaders cannot survive, let alone thrive, without a spirit of curiosity, a discipline of accountability, and a disposition for vulnerability. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Executive Hustle podcast. Our guest today is Jesse Greider, president of Perpetual Equity Group. Jesse, I have so been looking forward to have you on this podcast because number one, it is not every day that you meet a real live chimney sweep. And number two, every time that you and I talk, I come away learning something either from your rich personal stories or business experience. And so I know this is going to be a great conversation. From motocross to the boardroom, welcome to the Executive Hustle, Jesse.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Awesome. We're so glad. So, what did the 7-year-old Jesse dream of doing?
That's really funny. I remember having this kind of reminiscent conversation with my mom a couple years ago and how I diverted from what I wanted to be. But when I was 7 years old, my biggest ambition was becoming a landscaper. I was like infatuated with how people use hardscaping and plants and all that stuff to like transform the outside of a house. And I was just like, I loved that when I was a kid.
Now, was it the creative aspect of that or sort of the heavy machinery tools, kind of the boyish
I think it was
aspect?
definitely more the creative aspect,
Oh, how
for sure.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Now, how have you kept that creative side of you alive today?
I would say in multiple ways. I think that's evolved into into like creative problem solving. I mean, a lot that I see of the world is I see most things as an opportunity and not so much a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found through, and I'm talking more abstract, like outside of like being artistic. I'm looking at it more in a way of my lifestyle and everything that I do is that I truly believe that if you put your mind to something, that you can really truly achieve anything that's realistic. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you know me, my height and stature and all that. I'm never going to be an NBA player, so no matter how bad I want to be or practice, that's not going to happen. But what I do know is that things that are within reach, and there's just minor things that are there, is using creativity and kind of just creating your own path in order to get to where you want to go. Is something that I would say would translate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So creative problem solving, turning problems into opportunities. That's sort of how you kept it alive. I love that. That's awesome. So how did you end up as president of a private equity firm? You're investing in lots of different businesses. This is quite a diversion from landscaping, but you
Yeah.
had some very interesting stops along the way. Tell me a couple highlights.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to keep it as quick as possible. It was one heck of a journey, definitely a far stretch from being a chimney sweep at one point
Yeah,
in my
that you
life.
have to include that because I landed that on
Yeah,
our
yeah.
listener.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to summarize it, hopefully within a few short minutes, I would say um, a lot of things that I've been through in my life and things that I started on have obviously all compiled to the person that I am today.
Yeah.
Mistakes made, things that have gone well. I mean, I started in like actually working when I was like 10 because my dad had his own HVAC business, and I
Hmm.
attribute a lot of my work ethic to him. He was a perfectionist,
Hmm.
always be on time, or more. If you weren't early, you weren't on time.
Yes.
If you didn't do something right, he would tear it apart, make me do it again. You know, take pride in your work, whether you really like it or you don't. That type. And I was just brought up that way.
Yeah.
Working at a young age, after school, during summers, stuff like that. And fast forwarding, I worked in contracting for a long time. A lot of problem solving, led teams with no formal training. That's what I did for work. I did go to college, which I always look at as more of a smaller part of my life. And but going from there to my a small private equity company, I would say that leap happened after me and my wife had our first child.
Hmm.
And I was doing chimney work and I was put in very dangerous situations,
Yeah.
up high, carrying 80 pounds of mortar on my shoulder, going up 40-foot ladders,
Yeah.
standing on the top of a chimney crown in the wind, wasn't, I wanted to secure a future for my family and not be working 6 days a week, hard
Mm.
labor, 12-hour days. Uh,
Yeah.
that was my mentality. It turns out that that part of my life, I still work
I
by
was gonna say, I
good
feel like we've
minimum,
talked
so
about
that's
those
still there.
hours.
But yeah, ultimately, my stepfather had a consulting company here in Lancaster. I was living in Maryland at the time. He saw some of my past when I was younger, and I wasn't always the most well behaved. And I really grew up, into my early 20s, and I was having my child, and we had a conversation. He's like, you seem so much more responsible now, and you've always been, really smart. And I just want to give you an opportunity. What would you think about getting into accounting? So I
Hmm.
said, sure. And that's kind of what led it all to where I am now. I went into a consulting company, uh, primarily focused on the P&C insurance industry. So I focused on that. I started off as a staff accountant. I was doing well, excelling fairly quickly. They offered to send me back to school to get a degree in actuarial science because that was kind of where they were leading me to. But then I was excelling more so on the business side and decided was going to scrap the actuary side. I mean, I was doing well, but that's a very niche future
Yep.
of kind of pinning me to where I was going to go. So I actually just did finance and mathematics focus in doing that. I started growing through the company, started getting, more and more promotions. And just as a side note, my stepfather became a very important mentor of mine, friend, business partner, employer at the time.
Yeah.
And he does not, if he has to protect his business, he does it very well. He does not do favors just because you're a family member. I'm actually the only family member that ended up working for him that did not get fired. So I was doing well with clients
Yeah.
and started getting into M&A advisory and, some more senior level stuff. Started little side businesses and real estate investing and, started getting connections for raising capital. And then it all kind of culminated right before COVID, to make sense
Okay.
to use these skills and everything that we're doing instead of getting paid a consulting fee to do it. Let's start doing
Mm.
it for ourselves. And that's basically how it happened. We had a focus on real estate at first.
Mm-hmm.
We formed our LLC. 3 months later, COVID shutdown happened. And then real estate went down. Well, I can't say went down the tank. It shot up, but it squeezed a lot of our uh, strategies and the returns that we were calculating. It didn't make sense anymore because real estate was getting overpriced. But at that time, as you know, there were many businesses that were struggling. There were owners that were looking for a way out of owing a bank a lot of money. So what we were able to provide, an opportunity that I saw, is to provide liquidity. At that point in time in 2020 and 2021, a
Mm-hmm.
liquidity event for them to get out of the situation that they're in. Some of them, were about to lose their house, stuff
Mm.
like that. And being able to help them, and they were able to get out of a bad situation after, we did some due diligence and found that there were some turnaround strategies. We could also buy businesses for cheaper than what they used to be,
Mm.
to turn them around, and the returns were there. And that's just kind of the story and how it happened. And then just kind of kept growing from there.
So thank you for sharing that. And, some of the things I hear in there are how much of an impact your stepfather had on you in terms of being a supporter and an investor, even in you personally, right? As you turn around
Yep.
and be an investor in other companies, he was first an investor in you. And one of the things that first drew me to you when we first met is this concept of making meaningful impact to others.
Mhm.
I'm curious how that has evolved over time for you, in business and professionally, as you've moved the business from its early stages to where it is now. What does it mean to you to make meaningful impact in your community?
Yes. Well, it means pretty much everything to me. I feel like the success that I have is because of the way me and my partners view um, interactions with all stakeholders of any business.
Yeah.
whether that's, an employee, another vendor, who comes in and does some office cleaning, all the way to the customer, um, and just our general relationships with each other. Because my stepfather had a massive impact on me. Well, I was lucky enough to have two fathers, two great fathers, to the point where I could, I learned so much from each one, where I feel like some people don't have that opportunity. What my business partner Alex says is, he reached out to me one time. He said, "Did you ever read Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki?" And I was like, "Yes." He goes, "That's just you." And he was like, "That story is like literally you." And I never really thought about it that way. But then I thought about it, and I was like, wow, it's like I had a blue collar dad, white collar dad, um, no finance education on one side, finance education on the other side, ran companies very differently. And, so I was able to see that whole view, because one of the biggest reasons I even started the company wasn't just because there were opportunities. It was the fact that I saw my father work so hard his whole life, and like he would give the shirt off his back,
Yeah.
to anyone and help anyone, and got into a situation where he could not retire,
Yeah.
because he just didn't have that financial literacy.
Right.
So my private equity company is very different than your traditional private equity company, whereas I had a focus on helping people in the middle class have access to private equity type investments that they can't otherwise get to, because, your larger firms require, $1 million cash investment just to get in the door,
Yeah.
which obviously reserves for only a certain type of person in order to keep growing their wealth. And I wanted to be able to offer that to people who are close to me, just through certain like Regulation D and stuff, a mix of sophisticated and accredited investors. And, I do a lot of education on that side of teaching people investments and stuff to kind of really get them to understand what's happening.
Mhm.
But that being said, and the whole reason that I did it is to have an impact on basically everyone. I mean, it means a lot to me for someone to be able to walk away, whether they had to be terminated, whether they moved on to something bigger and better, for them to be able to say that they had a good experience.
Right.
And, and have no one have that bad taste in their mouth, in any situation. It could be just negotiating a contract. I want it to be win-win for everybody. We don't buy a company, go in and just fire everyone immediately, strip all the assets, and, do stuff. I mean, these are people's lives. They have families, they have, income that they rely on. And that's a big motivator for us. And like, does that necessarily make it the best business decisions that we've ever made? I mean, have we taken financial hits because we didn't have to make that hard decision or do it the way that is traditionally done? Yes. But at least we can hold our heads up high, and I can look myself in the mirror, and we all know that we are doing good for people. And I think that's what matters.
Yeah. And it sounds like you sharing this story with your father, the way you're doing this business, it's very different than the traditional model. And there's an element here of honoring your father in the way you're doing it.
Mm.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really meaningful story. You have got a lot of influence within this community. Do you find it challenging running this, or what do you find the challenges are in running sort of a type of business, but in a different model? What do you run up against?
Um, and it's hard to say because, well, I guess it's not hard to say. I definitely sometimes get looked on by people who are used to dealing with traditional private equity venture capital type models, as if, I've had people say before, that's not private equity, or just there's things of doubt of, just some sort of backlash, not backlash. I mean, I would just say, looking at it at a lens that, if we don't have a specific fund for one specific industry, for roll-ups, because as you know, I operate in multiple industries,
Yeah.
and for very specific reasons, I just have a different investment philosophy when it comes to that, which we can talk to if you want to get to that at some point. But but in doing so, within that model and the regulations, and, keeping within that fund is almost the exact reason why they need people who have $1 million in cash or more to invest. And, I found, private placements and being able to do these side investments and being able to be adaptable into whatever sort of industry strategy that we want, what sort of synergies exist within our existing companies, make a lot of sense. And I would say in doing it that way, just talking to people who reach out to me on LinkedIn, just banks and attorneys, and stuff. I get a lot of most of the time it's feedback, and people are just completely surprised that, someone who used to work construction just like started, like an investment company like this, so I get a lot of, I don't know, we're going to use the word praise for that. But, there's also the people out there that have, doubt its legitimacy just because it isn't the same exact model.
Uh-huh.
And,
Because you're brave enough to not do business the way everyone else is doing it.
right. And I've also had to learn from mistakes from not doing it the way that other people, I mean,
Uh-huh.
I don't just read a textbook on private equity and go, this is how they do it, so this is what I'm doing. I take the good pieces, and I also take, for being an entrepreneur, of just running other businesses, my interactions with clients and acting as the CFO, it's like for an insurance company, and seeing what worked, what didn't work, and I pieced it all together, and it's a learning experience. We still learn every day,
What is your approach to that personal growth? It's got to be a whirlwind of growth and continuous learning. How do you continue to learn? How do you capitalize on the learning that you're doing? How do you involve the people around you in that?
Yes, that's a great question. Through a multitude of things. I think one, having the mindset that I don't already know how this should go, and being open to any suggestion is something that is extremely important in my personal growth. There are times where I can get stubborn on like, this is how I've always done it, and that's something that I've heard, with my employees and stuff, and I'm guilty of doing it. I feel like everybody at some point in time is guilty of doing
They're
that.
like curse words, right?
And my partners will check me on that, and I will check them back, when they're acting like that. And, we really just keep conversations open, and, keeping everybody together. I mean, just as a leader in general, sharing those experiences with everybody, regardless of what level anybody is in a company, or family members, or just, I find that listening is so important to what people are saying, and being able to relate to them in a manner that I can pick up what they're saying or hear any sort of personal problem that they're having. And more often than not, I've experienced that in one way or another, or know someone who has, that
Yeah.
I can put them in touch with, or I can share personal stories with, with that kind of growth. And I find that extremely important. I mean, I'm bringing this discussion outside of course, I read a lot, and I like to do
Uh-huh.
studying, and I like to keep up on, what's going on in the world. I mean, yes, I do those things. And I think knowledge is extremely important, but obviously it's not everything. I really feel, you know, everyday interactions with people, and trying to help them grow in whatever they want to do, including myself, is more important than gaining the knowledge of a specific technical skill, and
Yeah.
while I also feel like that's important,
Right.
I also don't feel like it's necessary to get success.
Yeah. How to
You know?
learn is better than actually learning something.
Yes, for
Knowing
sure.
how to learn. Yeah.
Yeah. And also I would say jumping in with both feet sometimes in situations that I've never haven't had experience with, and just, talking about it, getting suggestions from people around me, and just going, okay, here we go. And it's going to be a learning experience, and let's just kind of figure this out. And
So this
that's
is the B plan violently executed today versus the A plan next week.
exactly. And there's
Yeah.
been and then personal growth from doing stuff like that. I would say analysis paralysis is the worst thing that you can do.
Yeah.
Not doing anything is not going to achieve any result.
Mhm.
Doing something, whether you failed, you're going to learn something, and whether you succeeded, you're going to learn something. And I think that's an extremely important thing.
I love it. So you and Nike are on the same page.
Yeah.
You just do something.
Just do
Just do
something,
something.
please.
Don't just sit there.
Yeah.
What's something, so you have an affinity for acting, right? That's always going to be your go-to. Where is a moment where your action took real courage? Something that maybe wasn't popular, but you thought was right. Something that took a lot of courage from you.
I think the mentality that I had when I was a couple years younger, in my 20s, um, raising our first child, about to have a second child, I was growing like my career at Charter Lane and, learning a lot through that experience, trying to do the best job that I could. I was back in school,
Mm.
just just get a degree in the field that I'm, working in finance,
Mm-hmm.
and, starting side businesses, trying to raise a family. And at that time did not have a lot of money and, financially not feeling good, with the family and everything. So I took it upon myself that I was working constantly, and then in between work I was going to school, and then when I came home I was like doing homework, and I noticed that my wife started, getting upset and, wanting to do more with me, and stuff like that. And it was always, I'm like, she's like, you need to focus on the family. And what I kept saying was, I am focusing on the family. Like, I'm
Mm.
trying to get us to a place that we're not struggling anymore.
Yeah.
And that was my mentality. And she was a stay-at-home mom, so she had a very different mentality on that because I wasn't home all the time. So the times that I was, she just wanted me to be present with her.
Yeah.
And then that came into obviously, her wanting to talk to her friends and family. I'm saying mine. I was very stubborn in this instance. And I would say, as much as I thought I was doing all that I could have done for the family, I was doing it in a way that, I was missing memories and experiences.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that the biggest thing that I had to do as far as courage that seemed really scary was looking back and just saying that everything that I have done over like the past 2 years wasn't necessarily 100% wrong, but it was wrong in the way that I handled it. And it was almost like it's like one of those life altering moments of growth
Yeah.
of going here, could be in defense about it. At any given point in time and have like a logical answer as to why I was doing everything right and how she wasn't showing the appreciation for my sacrifice for the family when I wasn't doing that with her,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was one of the biggest like moments that I felt like my whole body just dropped out of myself and was just like, oh my God, I can't believe like I was being like that,
Yeah.
even though I had nothing but the best intentions. It was nothing malicious. But I think for me to finally admit what I was doing, because I just was not relinquishing that,
Yeah.
and it wasn't just between me and my wife. As much as important as it was for other people
Uh-huh.
as well. I
Right.
wasn't doing
Right.
other family events.
Right.
If I was in certain business situations, I wasn't always present. And it was
Right.
the branches were going out,
Yeah.
and it was affecting a lot of people. And for me to be able to go and you know, um, do that was a very big moment in my life, and that
Mm.
would be more. Oh, yeah.
That took
There
personal.
are other personal moments of
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
like that, and we can delve into it if you want.
What did that mean to your wife to have that moment of acknowledgement?
Oh, it meant a lot for sure. It
Yeah.
was at the time I was just pushing her away, and
Mm.
basically my entrepreneurial pursuits were destroying my family, essentially. Like I was like this close to just losing everything at that time, a couple
Right.
years ago. So yes, it definitely meant a lot to her, but there was also a lot of uh growth that had to be done between us just because of
It becomes distant, right? Like you're just,
yeah, yeah. A lot of things had to be mended.
yeah, you're in the business of running the household and you're not really married. And
Yeah, correct.
and that's me speaking personally. I went through the same experience.
Yeah.
I have 4 kids and the first two if you ask them, I was a very different parent for several years than I have been in the last 4 or 5 years. And it's a profound shift when you allow yourself the permission to just acknowledge that you are not doing it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And you might have thought you were doing it, and you know, there's only going to be so many people at your funeral, and it's not the people that are at the office.
Correct. It's a very, very good way of explaining that in a really good perspective to have, because that was the path that we were going, and it was very painful.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many different ways to show, your, your dedication to the family. And we get in this trap, personally speaking, that the working hard and the hours. And I think you said it before we actually started recording, right? That entrepreneurial trap of, you're launching a baby of a company, right? But you also maybe have a baby at home.
Yes.
Only one really has a heartbeat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
But you think you are, there's this narrative that I think people in the moment probably can't hear anything but, what they are focused on, and
Yeah.
they come out of that. And I, I I love this conversation. I love this vulnerability that we have here in this moment, because the more we talk about it, the more we make it available for people to listen to and to think about and to reflect on for themselves, the more light we shine on it,
Yeah.
the less maybe people will suffer through what we,
Yes. I mean, if I could help one person from making that mistake, it would be worth it.
yeah.
You know,
There's a reason
very,
I do what
very
I do
tough road.
now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, so fast forward to today, you have three little ones now. You're an avid outdoorsman, right? You're hunting and fishing, and I know you have chickens because we talk about chickens.
Yes. Yeah.
You just bought you're just moved to a nice woodsy kind of property, and you're outdoors a lot. How are you balancing things now? How are things looking different? And you've learned from those lessons.
Yeah. I've made it a point over the past couple years, and not every day is perfect, but I have set myself a cutoff time
Hmm.
to be in the moment with the family. I know that discussed this in our group before as well. But what I've found is, one, delegation is important.
Uh-huh.
I can only be in so many places at once, because one of my biggest mistakes is spreading myself too thin,
Oh yeah.
which kind of what we just talked about was in the family, in
Yeah,
business,
yeah, yeah.
all that. Um, and in order to do that was kind of relinquishing some stuff of that I wasn't letting go. That also took a lot of time, but a lot of it is just a purposeful, hey, it is like 4 o'clock.
Mhm.
I left the house at 6, or I left the house at 7. It's time to go home. And it's hard sometimes to turn off the brain from thinking about all the things that are going on. And I found for myself that when I come home and I start cooking dinner for the family,
Okay.
or we just grab everybody and we go for a walk in the woods, or do something that kind of keeps me like busy but in the moment with the family, is
Yeah.
something that really helps turn off the business stuff and start engaging more
Mm.
with the family things, and kind of just setting rituals. uh,
Rituals, great.
I think is extremely, extremely important. With that, with sharing that time and not making that mistake again.
Yeah.
My wife, throughout the day, likes to just call just to say hi and text. And in the past, it used to annoy me because
Mm.
I'd be so busy and I'd just be like, I'm just trying to get a lot of stuff done. But now, even if I'm extremely busy, I will stop and I will, talk to her,
Right.
and it makes me feel better. It makes her feel better. It makes our
Right.
relationship better.
Right.
And, um, and I find that important in our growth in our relationship,
Mhm.
because times that I don't hear from her now, I'm reaching out to her, asking how she is,
Look at that. Look at
so
that.
yeah, so
Oh,
just things like that. And really having that cutoff time is extremely important for me. And every once in a while I get important phone calls or something after
yeah.
hours that I'm like, hey, I'm sorry, I have to take this. But the family is a lot more understanding now, because they
Right.
see that, like,
And there's a
I'm
routine. It's okay to break it, right? But when there's
yeah.
no routine, all of those calls were a problem.
Yeah, yeah, it was just super annoying to everybody. My kids
Yeah.
would get mad at me,
Right.
and calling my name constantly and just being like, "Get off the phone, get off the phone." And now it's not nearly as prevalent, so they're like, "Oh, let daddy go do his calling when I come back,
Right.
do that. And, I try to carve out just the best that I can, personal time with my wife,
Mm.
like at the end of the day at nighttime, whether that's just sitting on the couch together, and like rub her shoulders and watch a show on TV.
Yeah. Rituals.
Just that sort of thing I find, extremely important and something that I could always be doing better at for sure. But it beats like coming home, responding to emails, picking up the phone for every single call,
Yeah.
looking something up, writing down notes,
Right.
or getting
Right.
on my laptop and sitting there like a zombie because now I'm completely zoning out everything around me. It's been a complete 180 over the last few years, and
What's
yeah,
the impact to so that's a great, you put these things in place, right? You set a cutoff time, you flip the switch, you come home, we're going to get super active. We're either going to make dinner, go for a walk, right? You're just flipping that lever when you come home. These are awesome rituals that people can take away as lessons. What's the impact if we put the lens back on your team? Those are, I know you just said the impact to yourself, huge, right? Good on the family, good on you. How has sort of turning off and reducing access to you, how has that changed the team? What's been the impact back at the office?
I would say back at the office, I think it's created more autonomy
Okay.
of my team members, knowing that if they can't get a hold of me, or right now it's like, unless it's an exact, like, unless it's an emergency, I can't just call Jesse to just solve this problem for me. And I think that it's helped them,
Mm.
solve some problems. You know, the earlier this year and leaking into last year, I was going through some hard personal stuff that really catapulted me not being around the business
Mhm.
nearly as much and the team. And it was hard on them for sure. But it even more concreted my trust in them because they stepped up when they had to, and get things done. So my cutoff time started before that ever happened, and I think doing that it was extremely helpful because in the past, if it would have happened a couple of years ago, I had a very hard time saying no.
Mhm.
So, I was a yes man, and times that I should have just let the team develop their own problem solving skills, and stuff. It became a habit to just Jesse will just solve this problem for us, and I created that culture around me of
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
doing that on behalf of my team. Whether it's a
Right.
business partner, employee, 1099 contractor, it didn't matter. I was always made myself available to solve problems for others.
It's so
And
counterintuitive. I think young leaders fall into that trap where they think more time with me is developing my people. And your story illustrates, no, no, less time with me as the leader actually forces development for the team.
yeah, I believe so. I mean, I think with clear, concise communication and a
Right.
plan for where you're trying to go,
Yeah.
as long as they have the boundaries to operate in,
Yeah. Excellent
they
point.
don't
Right.
need me for everything.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that's extremely important.
Excellent point. Excellent point. I love that. I love that. Right. What is your one word that when you want people to think about you, what's the one word you want them to describe you with? This is your personal brand.
Yeah. And that's a great question. I've never really reflected on what that would be, other than if when people would say my name, the one thing that I want to come up is just knowing, I guess you'd have to fill in what that vocabulary word is for me.
Mhm.
But I think like just being a good person, I think is something that would be very important for me. I know that's not one word, maybe
We'll
integrity.
hyphenate it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's I just I my heart I feel can be too is very large, and I feel that that's a positive but also a negative for myself because I do leave myself vulnerable to be taken advantage of because of that.
Hmm.
But I mean it's helped me. um I kind of have some safeguards up now, as far as that trusting, But I think it's kind of like, what's the best way of explaining it would be when people think of my dad and my stepdad, both of them,
Mm-hmm.
they just go, that is a great man.
Mm. And they're the biggest influences that I've ever heard you talk about.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And in
Yeah.
very different ways. Isn't that so? I find that so fascinating.
Yes.
So different, but they had the same impact on you, and you'd use the same word to describe them.
Yes.
It's just fascinating to me. Yeah, that's amazing. Jesse, we have gone from chimney sweeps to private equity, from family to family. Like we've stayed with family this whole way. It's been
Mhm.
quite a journey. And I think the reflection that we've both been able to share, I hope will really touch people today. There's a couple things I'd highlight. As I said when we started, I'm always taking something away when we talk, and today is no different. I really enjoyed hearing from you that you first wanted to work in some way with a creative aspect, and you've still found a way to do that with problem solving and how you get into a business that may be challenging or having challenges, and you figure out a way of what the best solution is. And that what your company does is you're bucking the system, right? And I respect the hell out of that with you. And you are a good person. That's what drew me to want to know you more, to have this conversation. And I think people need to know about you and know about what you do because of the way you do that. You're making that meaningful impact. We talked about that, and just how important family has been for you, and how over the last couple of years, you've really, and so many of us have figured this out too late, figured out how important family is to you, right? And what does that
Mm.
mean in terms of how am I showing up when I show up at home? And you
Yes.
offered some really great ideas for people, right? Like setting the cutoff time, immediately jumping into an activity. So I am guilty of just like walking at home and I'm still checking the emails on the way in the door, right? But you found sort of a cheat around that. And it's walking right into something super active so that you just disconnect and get your brain totally switched into the next mode. So I just love that and I hope people take that away. And I'll just end on this, which is just do something. Just do something. Avoid the analysis paralysis. Doing nothing is not going to improve your situation, no matter what situation it's in, whether it's personal, whether it's professional. So I just
Mm.
love all of those. Those are amazing takeaways from today. And I know I didn't capture them all. I took lots of notes. Lots of things for today. How would people find you, follow up more about learning about you, about Perpetual or Charter Lane?
Yes. You can find me at perpetualequitygroup.com, charterlinkconsulting.com. Mostly I'm not super active on social media, but if there is one social media outlet to actually get in touch with me that I may get in touch back with you within a 2 week time span would be on LinkedIn. That would be my LinkedIn profile.
Awesome.
But the fastest way for you to get a response from me very quickly would be to email me at jgreider@charterlane.com.
Awesome. Just not after 4 o'clock.
Yeah, just not after 4. You won't hear from me.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's right. Great. Well, it was wonderful having you, Jesse, and look forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kirsten. It was great.
Thank you for joining me today for another great hustle conversation with the Central PA executive. You can find out more about my guest in the show notes. And if you liked the episode or have something to add to our conversation, please find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Subscribe, rate, and review. Remember, leadership is best practiced in community. You know a leader who needs to hear something from this episode, so pay it forward and send it to them today. Don't wait. Until next time, the best leaders not only lead well, they live well and learn well. Bye now.